Hello, this is Michelle from Simply Scape Handmade, and today we're going to take a closer look at some quilting design and share a new design called the orange peel. On the blog post today we talked about the three different types of quilting I find I use most commonly: the echo or outline quilt, the all-over quilt, and the artistic quilt. And in reality, I have to say that every design is artistic, some more than others. Most of our quilt designs come from everyday things. I know that I love to lean toward the traditional quilting designs because the women in our past looked at their lives and they drew inspiration from that, and I love that idea. I wanted to share with you, this is a quilt that is entirely inspired from my own backyard. This is a flower, an iris, that was blooming outside my door. It is watercolor painted onto a piece of fabric. And the quilting, so the design of the quilt top came from the nature outside my house. As I looked at this flower out in its natural element, I drew that inspiration for the quilting. I don't know if you can see it very well, but the quilting on the flower itself simply enhances the veins or venation in the leaves and on the petals. But then as I looked at this big blank area, I tried to think what was surrounding that flower out in my yard. And so I came with these just simple straight lines that reminded me of the sun rays that were just cast over the side of the house and shining down on the flower. It's a simple design and it's very basic, but it came from the inspiration of where this flower was in its natural element. So when we look at a quilt and we try to decide what we want to quilt on it, sometimes the best thing to do is look around us. I love to go outside and look at the bark of a tree or the veins of a leaf or clouds in the sky and draw that texture, that beautiful design out on paper and keep it tucked away to look at when I'm struggling to find a design for a quilt. Today's quilt draws its inspiration from an everyday thing found in most of our houses, and that's simply an orange. It's called the orange peel, although I've also seen it called a wine glass. And basically, it's a quilting design that has a circular design, but with the overlapping, it creates this little oblong wedge that looks like the peel of an orange. If you're a perfectionist and you really want things to lay out exactly right, I strongly recommend you get a template. I don't have a perfectionist mindset. I kind of like the flow and the comfortableness of just drawing my own design. I personally have used in the past a drinking glass. This time I used my canning ring. But any round shape can be used to draw this design. I like the fact that with a drinking glass or with this, you can see through the circle so that when you're laying it down, you can look for the overlappingness. When you look at this, you'll see that the circle is here, but the circles overlap, giving these little orange peel wedges around the edge of that circle. That's, to me, where the ability to see through your circular template really comes into play. I personally haven't seen a template for the orange peel or the wine glass. I'm sure they make them. I don't spend a lot of time looking at the template section at the fabric stores, but I like to come up with my own thing. When I quilt, when I draw a design on a large quilt, if this whole thing was going to be done in the orange peel, I would take and find the very center of the entire quilt, that very, very middle spot. And I would start my first circle there and do the entire center row of circles and then move from there. And that way, it fits the design would fit that quilt well. Now you want an all-over design to fall off the edge of the quilt. That's fine. But you really, I think your eye would be drawn to that middle, and you'd want that one in the center. To do the orange peel, simply find your center point and trace that first circle. What I do is I just scooch over, and that little wedge that we create, that little overlap, can be as large or small of an overlap as you want it to be. I made mine kind of small because I like little cutie oranges, these little tiny ones, and it would have naturally this round orange shape, and it would have this little peel on the edge. So I personally put mine fairly close together, and I just keep tracing it off the edge of the quilt. Again, I come down. When you come to the edge of the bottom edge or the top edge, your design's going to fall off the edge. You're going to have incomplete circles. But that's what you want to happen with an all-over quilt. The orange peel works very well in blank spaces on your quilt. In an all-over design, it works well in borders. It gives a nice texture. It has these good open loops along with the little skinny wedge piece. And I really like the contrast of the large open puff and the tiny little puff. So I have to say that I really, really like that. This is our fourth design on the block, and if you're writing on the edge what the name of it is, you're welcome to put either orange peel or wine glass. If you have any other things it's been called, I'm sure, feel free to share it with me, because I love to hear the different names for the designs that we do. Alright, let's start some of the quilting. Again, when I quilt, I go for the middle. I like to quilt from the center out. I like to quilt toward myself. And this is a circular motion, so I find it to be easier to work on a hoop with a curved design, where straighter designs I don't have a problem in the frame, but it's much more comfortable to work a curve with a hoop so I can move my fabric instead of moving my body. When I start, I have a simple small quilter's knot. I popped it in and hid it between the layers of my quilt. I want to be comfortable, good lighting, I'm not stressed out, I'm not panicked. When I want to start quilting, I just want to relax and enjoy the moment. We go in and we're looking for consistency. Consistency in the spacing that is in our design and the spacing in our stitches. Remember, it doesn't have to be tiny and tight. It needs to be consistent. Now, I'm quilting with a contrasting color on my fabric, a contrasting thread color, but that's only for this. Generally, my thread would very closely match the fabric I'm quilting on top of, but this is a sampler and I want my work to stand out. When I quilt, I'm not stabbing the finger underneath. My finger underneath will be at the back of the needle. And I want to start, and basically, it's like working a loop. Sometimes people are not sure, how am I supposed to quilt this? I see this, but where do I go with it? When I quilt the orange peel, I simply follow the actual loop. I will do this half circle. Then I will come over and do the next half circle. And the same way that I drew it with my pencil or my marking pen onto the fabric is the way I'm going to quilt it. So I'll quilt each half circle first. Then I'll go back and quilt this whole circle. And I'll work my way around each circle. The little orange peels will appear on their own while I'm working in the same direction that I had started drawing it. So there's no need to worry and stress that when I get right here, oh my goodness, I have this loop this way, which way do I go? I follow the actual half of the circle and let those little orange peels appear on their own. I don't really worry too much about going back and forth. I will say I try when at all possible not to use traveling in my quilting, where you go between the layers of the fabric and hop over. I really like to stick with the design and stay with it, and only travel in very small spaces if I have to. I don't want a lot of thread hanging out between the layers. I hope that you'll try out the orange peel quilt design, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them for us or send me a message at simplyscave@yahoo.com. Have a wonderful day, and let's go quilt something beautiful.